don't you want to win with us? What is the matter, my American friend? What has upset you? A bad machine doesn't know he's a bad machine. You still don't believe it. You still don't believe you're a bad machine. To know yourself is to know God, my friend. The factory knows, that's why they put you here. You'll see. You'll find out. In time, you'll know.
Oh, I know. I already know. I know that you are a bad machine. That's why the factory keeps you here. Do you know how I know, huh? I know because I'm from the factory. I make the machines.
You're listening to Jim Dynamo's Bad Machine, home of the intellectual smackdown, where thought exists without error and truth knows no compromise. No quarter is asked, and no quarter is given, as the lies that bind us to the bad machine are torn asunder with unassailable fact and unquestionable reason. So put on your thinking caps and strap yourselves in, and stand by for the original man-machine, Jim Dynamo.
When your bags ain't packed.
When Columbus discovered America, a series of mysteries arose to confound the scholars of Europe. Here are two continents, completely isolated from each other, yet they simultaneously developed similar cultures. For example, the Mayans measured time on the same principle as the Gregorian calendar of Europe. They used the same signs of the zodiac, the same decimal and mathematical system. They valued silver and gold, using both for jewelry and barter. Another mystery was the banana plant, a native of Asia that cannot be grown from seed. Yet Columbus found it thriving in the New World. Elephants at that time did not exist in the Americas, yet their likenesses were cleaved on the walls of prehistoric caves in Peru. The pyramids in Mexico and in Egypt were built on identical architectural principles. Then there was the striking resemblance of a witch of Spain and the witch depicted in the New World. But the most significant of all, Mayan and Aztec legends shared with Greek and Hebrew and Assyrian literature an account of a terrible deluge. A deluge many believe had destroyed the link, the mother empire that had spread her civilization to both sides of the Atlantic. The Greek scholar Plato recorded this theory first over 2,000 years ago. There was once another continent, Atlantis. The lost continent.
The Archon had left his home intent on traveling abroad for many years, as to avoid those under his command. He was a controversial leader, as Archons are known to be, and many, both ally and foil, sought to compel the Archon to alter his new edicts that he insisted would benefit once the effects were felt across their homeland. Wise, as Archons are required to be, the lawgiver knew a man who could not be found could not be compelled to do anything, so he went on a trip. The Archon first traveled to Egypt, to a land once called Zau, but in his time was called Sais. It was here the Archon of Athens, Solon, would be humbled in the temple of the ancient war goddess Net, when he learned his Athenians, and all their greatness were but a shadow of the Athenians of old, the Athenians who had fought and toppled a world power a nation of mighty men who, like the gods, crafted strange machines that harnessed awesome energies capable of destroying the world itself. What Solon would learn 2,610 years ago would inspire many years of conjecture and imagination as millions and millions, and now billions, learned for the first time that which Solon waited 64 years of his own life to learn. The lessons Solon had learned in those weeks in the ancient land of Chem will continue to inspire your children and grandchildren, and all the generations not yet born, as they learn for the first time the story of Atlantis. Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children, and there is not an old man among you. I mean to say, he replied, that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor by any science, which is hoary with age, and I will tell you why. There have been, and will be again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. The greatest have been brought about by the agencies of fire and water, and other lesser ones by innumerable other causes. For there was a time, Solon, before the great deluge of all, when the city which is now Athens was first in war, and in every way the best governed of all cities. It is said to have performed the noblest of deeds, and to have the fairest constitution of any which tradition tells, under the face of heaven. You are welcome to hear about them, Solon, both for your own sake, and for that of your city, for above all, for the sake of the goddess, who was common patron and parent and educator of both our cities. She founded your city 1,000 years before ours, receiving from the earth and Hephaestus the seed of your race, and afterward she founded ours, of which the constitution is recorded in our sacred registers to be 8,000 years old. As touching your citizens of 9,000 years ago, I will briefly inform you of their laws, and of their most famous action. The exact particular of the whole we will, hereafter, go through at our leisure, in the sacred registers themselves. Many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state in our histories, but one of them exceeds all the rest in greatness and valor. For these histories tell of the mighty power which unprovoked made an expedition against the whole of Europe and Asia, and to which your city put an end. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean, for in those days the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits by which you call the Pillars of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands, and from these you might pass on to the whole to the opposite of the continent, which surrounded the true ocean. For this sea, which is within the Straits of Heracles, is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but that other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a boundless continent. Now in this island of Atlantis there was a great and wonderful empire, which had rule over the whole island and several others, and over parts of the continent. And furthermore, the men of Atlantis had subjected the parts of Libya within the columns of Heracles as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as Tyrrhenia. This vast power, gathered into one, endeavored to subdue at a blow our country and yours, and the whole of the region within the straits. And then, Solon, your country shone forth in excellence of her virtue and strength among all mankind. She was preeminent in courage and military skill, and was the leader of the Hellenes. And when the rest of them fell off from her, being compelled to stand alone, after having undergone the very extremity of danger, she defeated and triumphed over the invaders, and preserved from slavery those who were not yet subjugated, and generously liberated all of the rest of us who dwell within the pillars. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared into the depths of the sea, for which reason the sea in those parts was impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island. The preceding account of Solon's adventures in Egypt were written 230 years later by Plato in his Critias Dialogues, which in themselves stir controversy as academics debate the existence of Critias and Timaeus, just as they ignore the larger point of the ancient exchange. Academics also ignore the writings of Crantor and his instructor Xenocrates, and of the Hebrew scholar Philo and their recounting of the ancient sunken nation-state Atlantis. But open-minded researchers find it hard to ignore the striking similarities in the Atlantis legend as told by other peoples from around the globe, whom, we are all told, never encountered the ancient Greeks or those Egyptians who were the keepers of the forgotten lore. The flood of Atlantis, in Solon's accounting, is oddly familiar to the Bible's own flood and its survivor Noah and his clan. But Noah's Ark seems strikingly similar to the flood of Manu, the lone surviving patriarch of India, and of the Greek Deucalion and his wife, and yet another in ancient Sumeria who was called Zisudra, and Utnapishtim before him, all the ark-building flood survivors, and their cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all had an identical flood myth. Not only do these disparate cultures tell of the same mythic flood as an act of divine punishment by angry gods, these different cultures and people go on to describe the very same individuals who rescued them from their post-Diluvian chaos and savagery: the Shining Ones, the Serpent Men, the Feathered Serpents, the Men of Atul, or Aztlan, or Atlantis. Again, only an academic can deliberately not put the loose ends together and see the connecting worldwide narrative. Just like only an academic can ignore the similarity in the ancient pyramid structures in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia, despite the identical precision in construction and the unknown craftsmanship. The academics cannot connect the matching mathematical precision in many of the megalithic structures from Iceland to Ohio, or those in Mexico City or in Cambodia. The academics cannot, or simply choose not to connect that as what's most obvious, because to do so would collapse the house of cards they have declared history. The Western world can never declare the 2,016-year-old civilization built on Judeo-Christian mythology is the true fabrication. Likewise, the majority of academics who not so secretly embrace Darwin's evolution myths will never connect the scientific anomalies that shred their fictions of choice. They would never dare concede a more provable reality than to the monkey tail to which they fix themselves. But the open-minded researcher, with access to the internet and Google Maps, can easily dispel the made-up realities. For almost 50 years, mystery shows have suggested various locations around the globe as the possible site for the city of Atlantis. But even these efforts are deliberately false in their subjection. The mainstream media will never tell you the truth about Atlantis, but Bad Machine will. Atlantis was real. Atlantis was not the island of Santorini, nor was it located at the Bimini Atoll in the Caribbean, or in the Yucatan, or in Patagonia. Atlantis was everywhere. Atlantis was a world power whose symbol is found in every culture of the world today. The same symbol, though more than 10,000 years old, has been twisted into a symbol of hate. The world-spanning symbol that represented world unity of the superpower Atlantis was the swastika. The swastika does not represent the sun. It represents the Earth spinning on its axis as seen from space at either the north or southern poles. The swastika emblazoned National Socialists of Germany were dubbed the Axis powers by Franklin Delano Roosevelt during World War II, as he, unlike most, was aware of the real motives behind the global conflict of the 20th century. To understand Atlantis and her fate, you must first realize the world during the time of the Atlantean Empire. It was very different than our own, where we have coastal cities and stretches of beachfronts. That world had miles of dry land, as millions of cubic feet of modern-day ocean waters and rivers were locked away, frozen in mile-high glaciers that stretched across the northern and southern hemispheres of our planet. The majority of you now live on land that was inaccessible only 8,000 years ago, as ice 4 times the height of the Empire State Building occupied the very same space where that building is located now. Those listening in Atlantic City, New Jersey, or further south, your current beaches were at a minimum 40 miles further east than where they are now. With so much water tucked away in ice, vast stretches of land around the world were exposed, and as man does, he creates havens next to those coasts to expedite travel, to capture the abundant resources that are also available there. Those coastal habitations would all contribute to the world myth that is Atlantis. In the center of the Atlantic Ocean is an 800-foot-high archipelago